growth is really dependent upon the value of that patient in your practice. Obviously, you want to maintain. I am much more an advocate of have a higher patient value and retention than I am the concept of, well, I need more, I need more, I need more, I need more, because you're going to just work harder, work smarter. You pick. It's funny. I ask a lot of dentists, do you want to work harder? Or do you want to work smarter? And most all of them will say smarter.
Yeah.
But then out of the other side of the mouth, they'll say, I need more new patients. I need more new patients. I need more new patients. But you're not saying the same thing. And I'm not discounting that new patients aren't valuable.
Correct.
But would you rather have a new patient come in the door that's worth $1,000 over 12 months or half that value?
This is Growth in Dentistry, a dental intelligence podcast, where we ask the question, what does growth in dentistry mean to you? I'm Steve Jensen, a dated dental nerd and your host.
Welcome everyone to the Growth in Dentistry podcast. Very excited for our episode today and our guest, Evan Lazarus. Now, before we jump in, I want to give a shout out to our marketing team. I do this every week, and to Dental Intelligence, all the work that they put in behind the scenes to produce this content and make sure that we get high quality guests on the pod. One of the things that they always give out is a $50 gift card for anyone who's willing to do a demo of Dental Intelligence. So if you've not checked us out yet, go to get.dentalintel.com/podcast to check out Dental Intel and what we're doing. We've had some cool improvements over the last year. So if you've checked it out in the past, certainly come and revisit what we've done, because we keep releasing newer and newer stuff with cooler and cooler features. All right. With that out of the way, I want to jump in and talk about Evan Lazarus. We've got a cool topic for the day. I want to introduce you guys a little bit to him. So Evan doesn't have a full, lifelong background in dentistry, but he does have a lot of years in dentistry now. He was on Wall Street for almost 20 years. He is one of the most data-driven people that I know. You have to be if you're working on Wall Street. So he brings an incredible business savvy perspective into this space. And from what I was able to pick up from my conversation with him and then online, is he ultimately made the transition into dentistry after meeting a dentist at a Suns baseball game back in 2014. So actually, Evan, I want to hear a little bit more about that. And then officially started Simple Impact Media, his marketing agency, in 2017. And he has had phenomenal success. He's partnered with Dental Intelligence. We recommend his services to people because we have proven data-backed trust in what he's doing, which will be part of our conversation today. But Evan, welcome to the podcast. Tell people a little more about what got you from Wall Street, this exciting, high-paced thing, into dentistry. I'm not saying dentistry is not high-paced. I think it certainly feels that way when you're in the business. But what got you into dentistry? And welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. What got me into dentistry? Well, I can tell you, and I've told lots of people this story, over the last couple of years that have asked me the same question. And the answer is, I never woke up one day and said, I am going to work with dentists. This was never a plan. Sometimes, you put pen to paper and you say, here's my business plan. Here's what I'm going to do. That never happened here. I basically left Wall Street for sake of, I was just burnt out. I was physically and mentally exhausted. I wasn't with my family when I should have been with my family. It was going to kill me mentally or physically at some point. I was very cognizant of that. And so I made the conscious decision to leave, the space. And I took a year off from there. And I just spent a lot of time with my family. And funny enough, I was at my son's Little League game, and I started talking with another dad and a local guy in my town, and he was a dentist. And, he started telling me about the struggles of his business. Not so much the dentistry part, because that was lost on me. The clinical stuff, I did not understand. But I did understand how to operate, manage people, internal efficiencies, reporting, numbers, analytics. But my philosophy isn't very complicated. A business is a business is a business. I don't care if you're selling ice cream out of a truck or you are a dentist. If you are not aware of the things that make your business go forward, the numbers, and the details, then you are operating blind and there is no growth. It's all based in hope. And successful businesses can't root themselves in, I hope I make more money, or I hope this business grows. Hope is not a strategy. And so he asked me to help him operationally come in. My background was in operations, and I helped him grow his business over, not too long period of time. And, from there, he wound up selling it to a DSO for a lot of money. And I think that catalyst made my phone ring, right? My name got, passed around in whatever circles, Facebook groups and things like that. And my phone started to ring, and it was another dentist and another dentist and another dentist. And, one of the things that was also very instrumental for me, and I give him a lot of props for it, is Dr. Len Tao, who I know a lot of people are
Yeah,
familiar
love Dr. Tao.
with. Right? He, I'm in Philadelphia.
Mhm.
Go Eagles. And I connected with him, and he asked me to help him with his practice. At the time, he was a practicing dentist. He's no longer practicing. And that went really, really well. And he also, introduced me to a lot of his colleagues and people in his world. And so that's kind of, how it went. And that's how I got here. I think part of the beauty of what I potentially bring to the table is that I think about things from the perspective of owning a business. I personally have owned businesses, over the years. I still own businesses, whether I'm an active participant or investor. I kind of understand what that looks like. And I know it's really, really hard for doctor owners, right? Those that are seeing patients, 3 or 4, even 5 days a week, all day, because if you line up your priorities, right, it's patients first, maybe your team second, your family, right? That business kind of slots in somewhere, depending on, in many instances, fourth, fifth, sixth, and sometimes not at all. And you rely on other people, for those kinds of things. And it generally doesn't go all that well.
Yeah. Man, I'm so excited to jump in with you. I hope everyone is getting a sense for like the way that Evan's brain works. Why don't I, Evan, move from your story into a conversation around data. So Evan and I were riffing a little bit last week is what kind of spawned this episode. And there's this common belief in dentistry that the more new patients I get equals more financial success in my business. And like intuitively, there's a lot of things about that probably aren't true. And I think we both shared the belief, but it made me want to say, hey, like dental intelligence, we're sitting on 10,000 practices worth of data. Like what do the numbers actually say? And I'm going to give these to Evan live, and then we're going to have a conversation around like why we think that might be. And then how do we actually like measure success in a business and achieve financial success? So here's, I want to give 3 numbers. So what I did is I went and looked at all 10,000 practices, and I said, hey, I want to isolate the fastest growing practices. So the first group I isolated was anyone who grew their active patients by more than 100%. So they doubled the size of their patient base. And then I extended it and said, let's look at everyone who grew by 50%, right? So they've got 1,000 patients, and then at the end of the year, they had 1,500 patients. So really high growth businesses, they're getting a crap ton of new patients into the practice. They're also losing a bunch, which we'll talk about. So I wanted to isolate those groups. So, and then I looked at just everyone, averages outside of that group. So the 3 numbers, the first one is called pre-appointment percentage. And this is a good indicator of how good of a job are we doing at retaining patients. Okay. So that one, when I looked at both the over 100% and the over 50% growth groups, their pre-appointment percent was 49% and 48% respectively. Okay. So about half of their patients were pre-appointed, which isn't like terrible. But when you look at the whole group, the average was 55%. So what that tells me is the group that's growing a lot faster is bleeding a lot more patients. Does that make sense? At least 5 to 6, 7% more. But when you do bleed 6, 7% patients, that's a lot of patients. Okay. It's 70 for every 1,000, 60, 70 for every 1,000. Okay, so that's the first one. So they're bleeding more patients out the back door than the average practices. And once again, hopefully we want to be better than average. So like we want to be more like 65% pre-appointment. Okay, the next number, I think, in this like logical workflow is case acceptance. So now we're getting new patients in, and what percentage of the dollars that are getting presented are actually getting accepted and completed in the business? Okay, so that's treatment dollar acceptance percentage. So when I looked at the over 100 and over 50% group, they were both actually the same. 35% was their case acceptance rate on the dollars getting presented. Okay, not on the patient saying yes to something, on the dollars. That's an important distinction. And the average for the rest of the group was 40%. So they're getting 5% less case acceptance on the dollars they're presenting than the average practice. Once again, I hope we want to be better than average. And then the last one I'll call out is like, after all of these levers are pulling, what's the annual patient value? Okay. Which all I'm taking is the total collections for the year and dividing that by the total number of patients. The average patient value for the average practice was $882. Now, for the over 100% group, it was 804. And for the over 50% growth, it was 808. So we're talking like an $80 difference in annual patient value if we're in high growth mode. So in all of these circumstances, when we're throwing a ton of patients into a business in high growth, we actually perform way worse on the big number outcomes: annual patient value, patient retention, and case acceptance. So Evan, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on those numbers. I know that's a lot of information at you live, but like, why would that be? Why would a practice see worse financial success per patient, per hour, per visit? Like, all of those numbers are affected as well. Patient retention, when we're just throwing new patients at the business.
Yeah, you threw a lot of numbers at me.
I did throw a lot of numbers at you.
And I got no visual, so I just
You're right.
pull everything down. It's hard, listen, it's not a one size fits all answer, right?
Yeah.
There's so many variables in that equation between, insurance and the dollars, connected to insurance, and demographics and the type of patient population that you see. So it's, when you look at these things, you really need to consider other variables, like the type of market serving, and what type of the plans you're in network with, or if you're fee for service, or what that all looks like as a construct of the business. I think there is a couple of things. One, on the case acceptance piece, because I deal with this a lot for doctors. One of the first questions that I ask is, what are your financing options for payment for patients? And what I usually get, and again, I'm generalizing, it's not a one size fits all, like I said, but it's, oh, we have care credit.
Yeah.
And then that's where the conversation ends. And you're doing yourself and your patients a disservice, right? Care credit is for some, but it's not for the masses. If you are not if you do not have a very high credit score, chances are you're not going to get any financing through care credit. So you leave this large, segment of your patient population potentially without the ability to, to move forward with dentistry. The bigger issue is communication. There is no, in many offices, there is no quality system or operational process for how to talk to patients about money. And when I talk to doctors, a lot of times what you'll get is, well, they go to the front and they'll, the person at the front, the treatment coordinator, might talk to them about payment options. But I think the doctors and the clinical teams in the back of the house really need to understand how to speak to patients about, the treatment they're going to get, the benefits of it, the concerns if they don't do treatment. To build some trust and to make the patient feel like they're in, the right hands. A lot of doctors don't talk about money. They just don't. They leave the room, they put it in other people's hands. And so there is this real big void of compelling communication. If somebody's going to spend, whether it's a few $100s or thousands and thousands of dollars, you want to feel like it's the right time for that potential, procedure, and that you're in the right hands. It makes sense for multiple reasons. And you want people to feel good about moving forward with treatment. A lot of that never happens. It just doesn't happen. Whether it's, we're moving patients around, like on a checkerboard. Okay, go see this person in this office to talk about money. Well, you've already lost. Chances are you've lost that patient, if that's the experience you're going to, because they know they're going to be sat down and they're going to have lots of paperwork in front of them, and nobody's speaking to them with any empathy or compassion or persuasion. And so there is this art of communication that, truthfully, doctor owners are not training their teams or themselves on how to do this. So I think that's one, real big pitfall that we see. And presenting somebody with financial options that really can make it work for them.
Yep.
If it's care credit or bust, then chances are you're going to see, again, markets may vary, but you're going to see, wild fluctuations, in those numbers. Patient value.
Yeah, let's talk about that one.
Yeah, it's a huge metric for us as marketers.
Which, hey, by the way, let me just make this comment too.
Yeah.
I also pulled some stats on, because Evan's a partner of Dental Intel, I can see how all of his clients are performing. And so I put some stats on like, hey, like, how are Evan's clients doing in comparison to the market? And Evan's clients' annual patient value is several $100s above average. So just for some context there, like the strategies that he's teaching are consistently producing high-level outcomes across his client portfolio. So just so everyone's aware. And then I'll also hit, when we talk about retention, there's some cool metrics there I want to share about what Evan's doing. But yeah, let's hit annual patient value. Like tell us about that number. Because I know you like that one.
So I look at dentistry the same way I look at any membership business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to veer too much off the rails, but if you think about a gym, right? Do you work out at a gym? You belong to
I definitely do.
Okay. So the Planet Fitness model is really very interesting because they charge, a very low price, right?
Yep.
$10 a month or whatever it may be. But they know the economics of the members, right?
Mm-hmm.
On average, a member will last 2 years, and the price is so affordable that sometimes they don't go.
Exactly. And it's
Right?
kind of this, everyone's welcome. Yeah.
80% of the people never go, but they continue to pay. Now, I'm not saying that's how it works in dentistry, but the concept is the same. You have to know the economics of your patients.
Mm-hmm.
What is a patient worth to the business? So if you have a practice, and I ask dentists generally when we first do a consult, before they even, potentially become a partner, I say, what is your annual patient value? What is one new body worth to the business over the course of the next 12 months?
Yep.
And 90% of the dentists have no idea.
Yeah, you're right.
They have no clue.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you don't know what that person on average is worth, right? How do you know what it is you're willing to spend to acquire them?
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole process is really a math formula. That's really all this is.
Mm-hmm.
When you break it down to its very core. So if I say to a doctor, look, your annual patient value is sub $600. I had a meeting with a doctor last week who, didn't know, but when we peeled it back, it was a $600 annual patient value. I said, you're not diagnosing, right? We're not getting patients to agree to treatment. These patients are not very valuable. Mm-hmm. Here you are, the doctor's talking to me about, I want to do more implants. I want to do this. I want to do big cases. I go, we're way far from that, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is a real disconnect between what's happening in your practice, the services that are being rendered, what patients are saying yes to, because they're really not very valuable.
Yeah.
Right? So let's look at why they are not valuable. What can we do to make them more valuable? And again, sometimes a lot of that can be insurance driven. If you're a Medicaid, practice, it's going to be about more volume.
Mm-hmm.
If you're a fee-for-service practice, it's going to be about less volume, more substantial dentistry, more comprehensive dentistry. And so it's just staggering to me how many doctors just don't look at this or aren't aware of it, because it really is a metric that I believe determines ultimately your success. We have practices that have patient values of over $2,000, over a 12-month period, well above what is industry norms, because they're trained in the art of communication and how to speak to patients and how to get patients into treatment. And so they're diagnosing more, and they're, presenting more comprehensive plans. And so, it's all very doable. The conversation that we, spoke about was the concept of new patients. You gotta have more new patients. You really don't. It's, do you want quantity, or do you want to do more comprehensive dentistry? Because, some of the numbers you threw out a few minutes ago were practices that are doing, they really increase their new patient counts, but aren't really growing.
No.
Right? Growth is really dependent upon the value of that patient in your practice. Obviously, you want to maintain. I am much more an advocate of have a higher patient value and retention than I am the concept of, well, I need more, I need more, I need more, I need
Mhm.
more, because you're going to just work harder, work smarter. You pick. It's funny. I ask a lot of dentists, do you want to work harder or do you want to work smarter?
Mhm.
And most all of them will say smarter.
Yeah.
But then out of the other side of the mouth, they'll say, I need more new patients. I need more new patients. I need
Yeah.
more new
Uh-huh.
patients. But you're not saying the same thing. And I'm not discounting that new patients aren't valuable.
Correct.
But would you rather have a new patient come in the door that's worth $1,000 over 12 months or half that value?
Hmm.
Because that's really going to be a determining factor of your growth over time.
Hmm.
You're going to churn a lot more. You're not going to get the value, you're just not going to get the fruit of what that potential patient, could be worth. And so I am a huge advocate of knowing that number and then driving business to say, how do we get this higher?
Hmm. Now, the other
How do I
thing,
get patients to be worth more?
the other thing that I love about you, Evan, is obvious in the way that you operate your company, that you're also about like sensible and meaningful growth for the business. And the number of new patients can fluctuate. Like, what does a business really need to be successful? What does that look like? One of the things that's interesting when I look at like Evan's clients, when it comes to patient retention, they're all above average. So it's clearly like not necessarily just about funneling a ton new patients in. Like one thing, well, Evan, you talk about it. How often do you see practices that are like, I need more new patients, I need more new patients, when in reality, what they need is to fix the backdoor problem?
A lot. So
Mm-hmm.
one of the best, I think, visual graphics in the analytics platform is when you look at your new patients, um, you know, window or whatever that
Uh-huh.
your scorecard or whatever that
Yep.
little, and you dig into the trend, and it shows you your front door, versus your back door. And what a lot of doctors do is they'll just look at the front door. And
Yep.
they said, well, October was a good month. We had 40 new patients, and November was a bad month, and September was a great month, and August was crap, right? I get this, like, this is
Mm-hmm.
usually the conversation we have. And what I really look at is, assuming you've been in business for at least 2 years, I look at net growth. I think that is the most important number when we talk about patients and new patients.
Yep.
Because you could get a whole ton of new patients, but if you're not retaining patients on the other side,
Mm-hmm.
right? If your front door has 50, new bodies that walk in for the first time, but you've had 60 people that haven't been there in 18 months for anything, right? And now
Mm-hmm.
they're lost. Your practice, your active patient population has contracted by 10. And so
Correct.
that to me is I don't care about the 50. I care about the
Mm-hmm.
growth of the practice over time. I go back to my gym, sort of cliche,
Mm-hmm.
right? The only way a gym makes money is that if its active membership count continues to, increase month over month, year over year. It works that way in dentistry. Typically, when I see a practice that is consistent with net growth,
Mm-hmm.
meaning they may have had 30 new patients this month, but they only grew by 5.
Mm-hmm.
Their net growth was by 5 because they had 25 out the back door. That's okay. You
Yeah.
grew, right? So even if it's by 1 or 2 or 5 or 10, right? As long as you're growing month over month over month over month, what I typically see on the other side of that is the collections also will
Yep.
grow, right? Your collections on a monthly and annual basis will grow commensurate, right? Practices that are growing month over month also tend to be practices that have higher collections over a period of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not rocket science here. This really isn't rocket science. So when I get doctors that say to me, well, I need, I get about 30 patients on average a month. I want to get that to 50.
Mm-hmm.
Neither of
Yeah.
those
Yeah.
things really mean
Why?
anything.
Yeah.
It doesn't, they're irrelevant. Okay. And my follow-up question is, well, how many are you losing on average,
Yeah.
out the back? And it's like, we don't track that.
Yeah. They don't know.
I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. Well, if you don't know, 50 is an irrelevant number. Just go, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're just, it's a, I have to pick and choose my words carefully here. It is a very, very naive way to think about the business. And ultimately, you're just going to wind up going in circles.
Yeah. Well, what's cool, by the way, for those that are listening about the group that Evan works with. So for context too, if you're like, does Evan only, work with startups and that's why he's successful? Does he work with what is the size of business and what's the percentage of growth? So the average practice, as I'm looking at like Evan's numbers right now, like the average practice has somewhere between like 2,000 and 2,500 active patients, and the average annual growth in their patient value. So this is like, we added a bunch of patients. We also lost some patients because he can't control that as much as the marketing agency, but he will help guide you there. The average growth is between 8 and 15%, which is really healthy growth when you have between 2,000 and 2,500 active patients. Like that's a really great accomplishment to have consistently across so many clients. So Evan, that's like pretty cool, by the way, to see that. And it shares this clear picture that what you're doing and what you're sharing with the audience like absolutely works. Like it's definitely the way that we should be thinking about marketing, about practice growth, and about adding value to the business. So go ahead.
No, I was just going to add to that, I am a believer. Most people call me because they want marketing.
Yeah.
Right. Which is more phone calls, more patients, right?
Great.
And that can come through various advertising or SEO or any of those kinds.
And you can do that. You're great at that. Yeah.
And that's all good and well. But typically when I see a doctor that has agency hopped, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm their third agency, fourth agency, right? I've gone from this person to this vendor, to this vendor, to this vendor. It generally tells me that the expectations are unrealistic of the doctor, or more importantly, they haven't taken the time to actually study their business or invest in their business.
Yeah.
Usually when I start to peel back the onion on looking at the business, that's when we find, oh, there's a huge backdoor problem here.
Mm-hmm.
Or you saw 200 patients this month, but only diagnosed, 40 of them.
Yeah.
Right. If you're not presenting treatment to patients and you're not getting patients for treatment, none of it really matters, right? They're not going to have the patient value isn't going to increase. And so I believe, and I really don't have statistics to back it up, but I'm fairly confident that doctors that use DI analytics they just look at their numbers, right? They know what's going on. Generally have a much higher growth rate than doctors that don't see anything.
Yeah.
Right. All they know is we got 30 new patients this month and we collected, X. And that's all they know.
Yeah.
And so I think that just looking at your numbers in and of itself as a ritual or a practice or something you do regularly immediately elevates without doing anything, doing anything else.
It's funny you say that because I'll post stats on social media sometimes and it's like pretty consistent. I'll get called out. Well, that's not fair because your average is the average of DI clients and they're probably better than the real average. And in my mind, I'm like, well, that's fine by me. Like, thank you for making the point, right? Like when to your point, right? When performance is measured, performance improves. So I'm going to publish what I have, right? So the best averages I have. But yeah, realistically, like the numbers I shared today, if we could get a true national average from all the folks that aren't measuring their performance, it's probably lower. Growth rate's probably lower. Annual patient value is probably lower. Patient retention's probably lower. That is probably true. And I definitely believe that when performance is measured, performance improves. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
Well, Evan, we're at the tail end. We've been having a good chat. This has been awesome. Talking about demystifying this idea, like just carte blanche, new patients equals better profitability isn't necessarily the case. Talked about annual patient value, patient retention, case acceptance. I think a really meaty episode for listeners. We always end with a question. What does growth in dentistry mean to you? And I'd love to hear your response to that.
It's a loaded question. So I'm going to do my best to keep it super concise.
Great.
I think growth in dentistry is the same in growth in any business. It's when you achieve operational efficiency, that's typically when you start to see growth. So what does that mean, operational efficiency? It means that you've taken the time or even that you've made the financial investment, one or the other, if not both, to make sure that you, the clinician, the provider, and the people that are around you, right, whether it's patient experience or how the phones are handled or any of the front or back of the house, that your team is, really good at what they do. That you've invested time or money or both in making sure that those people are great at what they do that majority of what they do can be measured in some effect, that people are setting and achieving goals. And practices that do that tend to blow the marketing out of the water because the patient value is so much greater than it is otherwise, right? I know doctors that just have people answering the phones that are just because they're warm bodies. They don't know how to speak to patients with empathy or persuasion or compassion, right? It's like they're just name, address, when do you want to come in, right? Like it's like they're filling out a form. And that flows all the way through, right? Marketing makes your phone ring, but revenue, there's so many variables between the phone ringing and the revenue occurring that fall squarely on the shoulders of your team. Getting that phone call to convert, getting the patient to, show up, building trust and rapport, speaking about your core values of your practice to a patient, diagnosing, getting them to want to agree to treatment, like reappointing, all of those things are internal processes. And so to me, growth really stems from, like I said, operational efficiency. It doesn't really stem from my Google ads are better than somebody else's, or your website is prettier than somebody else's. Those are nice things to have, and they do matter. But in terms of actually being, where I think the difference is really made is in, having a really effective team that can be measured.
I love that response. Operational efficiency. Well, Evan, thank you for joining us today. That was a great podcast. Once again, I'll thank the marketing team at Dental Intelligence for producing this week after week. And thank you, listeners, for joining us once again. If you haven't liked the podcast, please like and subscribe to the podcast. Evan, for those of you that want to reach out and connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
I mean, my email is always open 24/7. It's Evan, EVN, at simpleimpactmedia.com.
Okay, sweet. And we'll throw that in the show notes so that everyone can reference that, see the email, and then we'll throw your website on there as well. If that's cool. Throw that in there. Cool.
Very cool.
So check out the show notes for that. Go ahead.
Happy holidays to you.
Yeah, happy holidays to you as well. We're recording this on December 27th, so we're about to be the new year. When we release, this will be, January, February, and a great way to think about starting the year. What are your goals for this year? What does growth mean? This will be a great episode to start off the year and really kickstart the way that you guys think about 2024. Well, thank you, Evan, for joining us. And once again, thank you to the listeners. My name's Steve Jensen, the host of the podcast. Keep growing.